Hey, what's up guys, YouTube here, and today I'm going to be doing a reaction to Poe vs. Shaq from this series called SHOWOFF SHOWDOWN by your favorite Canadian YouTuber, in which case it is my second favorite Canadian YouTuber, in which my favorite is Nico BBQ. But that's besides the point. So, this is my very first SHOWOFF SHOWDOWN reaction I've done, but it's not the very first SHOWOFF SHOWDOWN I've seen. This is the second one. The first one I saw was Shantae vs. Crash, and then ever since then I've been getting onto the series, and I promised your favorite Canadian YouTuber that I would do a reaction to this, and with that, it is finally here. So, and while we're here, I'm gonna beat some squirms, because that's what the box calls it. So I need to make sure that the volume is low enough so y'all can hear me commentate. And I should probably plug in the lights that I have, because it's dark. Come on. Come. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. Alright, without further ado, the original link's in the description. Make sure you go subscribe to your favorite Canadian YouTuber. And with that being said, let's begin.
To SHOWOFF SHOWDOWN!
This announcement thing at the beginning is...
called SHOWOFFs, and this is the series for the SHOWOFF Showdown.
It's fascinating to me, alright? It's fascinating.
Tonight, we have a legendary epic battle between the Kung Fu Panda and the Legend Reborn. That's right, Poe versus Shaq. Sometimes the most unlikely of martial artists can become the greatest. Oh, and before we begin, this battle will feature a full-on re-analysis for both characters. So let's not waste any more time and get straight into it, shall we? Now without further ado, it's time for the SHOWOFF SHOWDOWN re-analysis.
Let's go.
In the heart of ancient China, legend tells that one day a worthy Kung Fu warrior would earn the honor of becoming the greatest Kung Fu legend in the history of China, known as the Dragon Warrior. The very first Kung Fu master who had the potential of earning such a title was Tai Lung, the very first student to master all the 1,000 scrolls of Kung Fu. However, the great master Oogway saw darkness in Tai Lung's heart and refused to give him the Dragon Scroll. Feeling angered and heartbroken, Tai Lung unleashed his rage on the valley and tried to take the Dragon Scroll by force. However, he was stopped by Master Oogway and Shifu, and then he was locked up in the highest maximum security prison in China for 20 years. Until one day he escaped and broke out of prison and began his journey and seek revenge on his former masters and take the Dragon Scroll once again. It was at that moment that Master Oogway knew it was finally time to choose the Dragon Warrior before Tai Lung makes his way back. Oogway and Shifu hosted a tournament with the Furious Five, the 5 greatest Kung Fu masters Shifu has ever trained. The Furious Five would compete to determine who will become the Dragon Warrior. However, when it was time to choose the Dragon Warrior, instead of choosing one of the 5 perfectly qualified masters, Master Oogway made a more unexpected decision. Instead, he chose a big, fat panda named Poe.
Smart move, y'all.
Yeah, it makes about as much sense as when SWORDON chose a bunch of random teenagers as the Power Rangers, but that's a different story. Okay, now before we immediately judge Poe, let's take a look at his story first. In the beginning, Poe was born in a thriving village full of pandas where everything was peaceful, until one day the evil peacock prince, Lord Shen, ordered genocide on all the pandas, which explains why the panda population is pretty low nowadays. Anyway, while the village was burned and most of the pandas were killed off, Poe's mother managed to escape with Poe in her arms. She placed Poe inside a radish basket, and then she ran off and was hunted down by Shen and his bloodthirsty henchwolves. To be honest, with a character like Poe, you wouldn't expect him to have such a dark and tragic backstory. Anyway, Poe was eventually found and adopted by a goose named Ping, who raised Poe as his own son. He hoped that one day Poe would carry out Ping's family tradition and take over his noodles restaurant. However, as Poe grew up, he had a much different dream. Now, we've all had our own passionate interests while growing up, some of which mostly involve music, sports, books, video games, etc. Now, Poe, on the other hand, his his passionate interest was Kung Fu. As Po grew up, he loved Kung Fu and everything about it. He's read every story, heard every legend, knows every master, and even collected the merchandise and action figures. He was basically a...
Yo, somebody caption that. Somebody caption that while you're at it.
full-on Kung Fu fanatic. However, the only thing he lacked was that he didn't actually know Kung Fu, meaning he was never formally trained. Now, most of Po's life was rather unsatisfying, as he never had the chance to follow his dream. But that all changed when one day Po strapped himself to a chair full of fireworks and literally blew himself into the tournament ring just as Master Oogway was about to choose the Dragon Warrior. When Po woke up after a painful fall, the first thing he knew was that he was chosen as the Dragon Warrior. I know, even Po was confused. After Po was carried into the Jade Palace with its hull full of Kung Fu wonders, he met Master Shifu, who really didn't like the idea of Po being chosen as the Dragon Warrior. So Shifu said he trained Po, but really, he was just trying to get rid of him. And boy, did he try. But boy, was Po persistent. However, things took quite a U-turn when Master Oogway told Shifu that his time has come and that he must continue his journey without him. Oogway's dying words to Shifu were, "You must believe," which specifically refers to Po, meaning Shifu must believe that Po is the Dragon Warrior destined to defeat Tai Lung. It wasn't easy for Shifu, but over time, he learned to have faith in Po. Not only did he train Po for real this time, but he even found a rather unique way to train him, one that involves food. In only less than a day, Shifu managed to train Po to the point where he nearly became a full Kung Fu master. Well, almost. When it was time for Po to receive the Dragon Scroll and become the Dragon Warrior, Po was surprised to find out that the scroll was completely blank. Po was pretty confused at first, but over time he figured out that the blank scroll actually showed him his reflection, which metaphorically indicates that Po was the Dragon Warrior all along, and like the wise Oogway said, he just needed to believe in order for it to be special. And he figured it out just in time, as Tai Lung has finally made his way back to the Jade Palace and almost killed Master Shifu with his bare hands. When Po confronted Tai Lung, long story short, after a long, hard-fought, and partially comedic epic battle, Po defeated Tai Lung, saved the valley, and that's when he truly became the Dragon Warrior. As Po's journey continued, he's achieved many other feats along the way, such as when he saved all of China after taking out a wolf army and defeating Lord Shen, the same evil peacock who killed Po's parents, along with most of the panda population. Po found the path to inner peace, defeated many other Kung Fu masters who were just as skilled, if not more skilled than Po, most of which have names that are kinda hard to pronounce. Anyway, in the third movie, spoiler alert, Po met his real father, who then took him to a
I've
village
seen the third
full of
movie
pandas,
and only the
which is
third
when
movie.
Po found out that all the pandas were still alive, or most of them at least. Anyway, when an evil spirit warrior named Kai stole the chi from every Kung Fu master, including Po's friends, and then threatened the existence of every panda afterwards, Po managed to train an entire village of pandas in the ways of Kung Fu in only less than a day. After that, Po fought against and defeated Kai in the spirit realm, became a master of chi, met Oogway in the spirit realm, returned to the mortal realm with the help of his friends and family, and once again proved just how much of a pure awesome Kung Fu butt-kicking Dragon Warrior we've all known him to be. Now keep in mind, I'm only giving you the very abridged version of Po's story, and there's a lot more in-depth detail you can find simply by watching the movies. Okay, now that we got Po's life story out of the way, let's see what this big black and white Dragon Warrior is capable of. Not only is Po obviously a Kung Fu master, but he is one of the fastest trained masters ever recorded, because while it normally takes years for one to fully master Kung Fu, Shifu managed to train Po into nearly becoming a master in only less than one day, which is very impressive. And like I said earlier, Po was able to train an entire village of pandas in the art of Kung Fu in only less than a day as well. Po is also a fairly good battle strategist, puzzle solver, and rather quick thinker, although that can be a little inconsistent sometimes. Now as for Po's physicality, despite not being in the best shape, Po is pretty impressively strong. In fact, he once launched Tai Lung hundreds of feet into the air with a single belly gong. Not only that, but Po's strong enough to catch cannonballs with his bare hands shortly after they were fired, can lift and throw a giant crocodile about twice the size of a regular croc, which should weigh about 4,700 pounds. He once held up a giant wooden water tower by himself, and he even once threw a stone hammer so high in the air that it disappeared from sight, and in just a couple seconds, when it came back down, it was smoking, suggesting that it may have even exited the atmosphere, and all this amounts to throwing it at Mach 58 speeds, and considering the hammer's tip was made of stone and about 3/4 the size of Po himself, this should put Po's destructive capability at a very high city block level. So let's just say Po Po can pack quite a punch. Now, Po is also a lot faster than he looks. Not only is he fast enough to dodge cannonballs along with Pain Pink's magic lightning, but he once ran so fast that his hands caught fire, meaning he was moving at hypersonic or Mach 5 speeds. Now, as you would have guessed, Po can take quite a hit as well, which leads me to durability. Not only can Po tank an incredible amount of abuse on a regular basis, but he's also durable enough to tank point-blank fireworks and cannonballs. Tanked falling from hundreds of feet at the beginning of a story, was unaffected by Tai Lung's nerve attack, which triggers nerves and pressure points. Tank's getting hit by Tai Lung so hard it made a crater in the ground, followed by Tai Lung diving into him and forming an even bigger crater. Tank getting smashed by a building-sized rock, and then getting punched into another building-sized rock by Kai without a scratch, got struck by lightning, and even survived having a 12,000-pound elephant being dropped on him from over 100 feet. There are plenty of other durability feats I haven't mentioned, but I think I covered all of his most impressive ones. Now, not only is Po a physical powerhouse, but he's also got a lot of his own unique abilities to top it all off. For starters, with Inner Peace, Po concentrates and slows down time around him to give him enough time to prepare with and to deal with attacks, such as when he caught and redirected cannonballs. Next up is one of his most important abilities, known as Chi. Chi is basically the spiritual life energy that flows within all living things. You know Ki from Dragon Ball Z, right? Well, same idea. And speaking of which, when Po mastered Chi, he was able to perform his own version of the GT Dragon Fist. Don't believe me? Then just take a look at this.
I've seen the movie. I've seen the movie, so I know what he's talking about.
You can't tell me that wasn't a Dragon Fist. Okay, now in all seriousness, Po can manifest his inner Chi to allow him to dodge and manipulate attacks, and he can overload his opponent with Chi to make them explode, such as when he literally broke Kai's spirit. He also had his hero's Chi enhanced by the Peace Tree that allows him to increase his speed exponentially, fire lasers out of his hands and belly, and supercharge his physical attacks. In fact, he once used his hero Chi to defeat an army of demons as well as a dragon bigger than the Jade Palace. Okay, now that we got Chi out of the way, Po has many other techniques, such as the Golden Lotus Clap, a blinding wave of energy, fluttering finger mind slip, which erases his opponent's short-term memory, the Thundering Wind Hammer, a blast of energy that sends his opponents flying thousands of feet away, the Mongolian Fireball, which is exactly what it sounds like, and when two fireballs combine, it creates a black hole type effect. The Silken Moon Touch, a concentrated blast of energy that darkens the sky temporarily and attacks all nearby enemies with tremendous force. Chawa Punch Kick, a paralyzing pressure point attack that's very similar to Tai Lung's nerve attack. And finally, I saved the best for last, the Whooshy Finger Hold. When Po grabs his opponent's finger with his thumb and index finger, and when he flexes his pinky, it's basically a Kung Fu death sentence. Now in terms of exactly what it does, when Po used this technique suicidally, the resulting effect appears to either disintegrate or evaporate the victim's physical body and then sends their soul to the spirit realm, which is basically like Kung Fu heaven. Now, Po was able to return to the mortal realm, but that required outside help from his friends and family donating their chi in order to bring Po back. However, there is only one flaw with the Whooshy Finger Hold, and that it doesn't work on anything that's already dead or a spirit warrior like Kai. Okay, now that we know what Po can do, let's see what kind of weapons he's got packed up his arsenal. For starters, Po has the Sword of Heroes, a mystical artifact that is said to be so sharp you can cut yourself just by looking at it. Po also has a pair of nunchucks, a bow staff, and a crossbow, which do exactly what you think they do. The Tri-Bow Yao, an extendable wooden staff with iron balls at the tips. And a parasol, which is likely used for defense, and Po has shown surprising adeptness with this weapon. Now, there are quite a few other things in Po's arsenal that I haven't mentioned, but because Po has either lost or gave up the ability to use them, they won't be included in this battle. Okay, now as unstoppable as Po may seem, he does have his fair share of weaknesses. Po can be very cocky and arrogant at certain points, which is usually not a good sign in mid-combat. Some of Po's techniques can be avoided or countered given circumstance. Despite all the punishment Po can tank, he's not invincible and enough force will wear him down and kill him. In fact, that cannonball did almost kill him in the second movie, FYI. Not to mention, Po's body is also vulnerable to improper acupuncture, which could paralyze his nerves or maybe even stop his heart if stabbed in the wrong places. Also, Po's experience using the impossible moves he has learned is very limited, so he may not fully remember the techniques if he remembers them at all. But despite all this, Po has earned the title of Dragon Warrior for a good reason, and when it's time to bring out a dose of awesomeness, you know Po will be ready to finish things off with a giant skadoosh!
Oh, wow.
In 1994, there was a game on the Sega Genesis and Super NES known as Shaq Fu. Shaq Fu. Just the name makes people cringe. Like, you don't even want to go.
Oh, the angry video game
It wasn't all
nerd.
that good.
He's
However,
gonna
that
take
didn't
you
stop
back
it
to
getting a
the
sequel.
past.
That's right. In June of
He
2018,
played his
they released a
shitty games
sequel
that suck
known as
ass.
Shaq
He'd
Fu:
rather
Legend Reborn.
have
In
a
fact, Shaquille O'Neal himself
buffalo.
said that not
Take
only
a
is this game way
diarrhea
better than the
dump
old
in
one,
his
but he even got
ear.
the same people who worked on amazing games such as Halo, Street Fighter, and Final Fantasy to work on the game. Long story short, I highly recommend playing it. Anyway, if you're wondering how the story goes in this game, well, it's a little hard to explain because the game's story is convoluted and full of holes. Although I highly doubt it's as convoluted as Sonic 06 or Kingdom Hearts lore, but it's still best to pay attention. Now, from what I've seen, this game takes place in an alternate universe or reality where famous former NBA player Shaquille O'Neal has a completely different life story from our own universe, and his destiny was to become a martial artist instead of a basketball player. Although a little piece of trivia, the real Shaq actually knows mixed martial arts, including boxing, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, and wrestling. In fact, he was even on WWE a couple times. But I'm getting off topic. Now keep in mind, this pre-analysis on Shaq contains a lot of spoilers from the game Shaq Fu: Legend Reborn. So I recommend either playing the game or watching the gameplay before watching this pre-analysis. But of course, it's entirely up to you. Anyway, in this game, Shaq's story begins in ancient China, the land of dragons, legends, and General Tso's chicken. He was an orphan baby found in a handbag in a river. The only clue to his identity was a mysterious birthmark. He was found by a Chinese woman who raised Shaq as her adopted son. As the years went by, Shaq grew like wild bamboo. During his childhood, he was bullied, alienated, and tormented, all because of his enormous size. And possibly also the fact that he was the only black kid at a Chinese school, though that was never directly stated. Anyway, there was an old man named Yi Yi who took interest in Shaq, and he told Shaq that there was great power within him. He trained Shaq in the ancient fighting technique of wuxing, and eventually, Shaq became a martial arts master. But that's just the beginning. One day, Shaq's hometown of Hunglo was being attacked. After beating the crap out of a bunch of Kung Fu thugs who were trying to kill his sensei Yi Yi, that's when Yi Yi decided to tell Shaq his secret that he's been keeping from Shaq his whole life. At first, Shaq thought Yi Yi's secret was that he was gay, considering that he once made Shaq wax his rickshaw while wearing a mankini, and not to mention an indescribable internet browser history, but that wasn't it. It turns out Yi Yi was actually a guardian of mankind and was secretly training Shaq into becoming a member of a secret order and protecting of mankind. And good timing too, because according to Yi Yi, every 1,000 years, the Chinese god of death known as Yan Lo Wang tries to break out of hell to destroy the world. And yes, Yan Lo Wang is a real deity in Chinese mythology, in case you're wondering. Anyway, Yan Lo Wang has also sent demons to Earth disguised as celebrities who brainwash people into becoming stupid so humanity will be easier to conquer, which seems to explain a lot about what's wrong with our generation today. Anyway, Master Yi has given Shaq a mission to find and kill all
like Island Boys Productions, Yi Nation.
literally raises hell on Earth. And it was also his dying request, considering he told Shaq right before he died from being murdered. That's when Shaq's journey began, as he traveled around the world in search for these demon celebrities. Along the way, he had to fight off entire armies of kung fu thugs, ninjas, wailing banshees, dragon cosplayers, big fat guys he made fun of, biker gangs, blood-sucking lawyers, sugar-craving zombies.
This looks like guys from Fallout, or not Fallout, Brawlout.
Fire-breathing Ku Klux Klan members with crackling teenage voices, and even Nazis. Yes, this is a game where Shaq is beating up Nazis, but I'm not done yet. Anyway, after facing all of that, Shaq has found and defeated all of these demon celebrities one by one, including Girl Smacking Frizzle, Donald Guan Yu Trump, Justin Babyface, Diamond Hilton, Candy Cartushian, Benedict Gibson, etc. And yes, I altered those names on purpose just for the fun of it. Anyway, at the end of the game, Shaq meets Yan Lo Wang himself, or should I say herself. Yan Lo Wang was disguised as Destiny, who I'm guessing is a parody of either Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, or Madonna. Honestly, it's hard to tell. Anyway, that's when Shaq found out that Destiny,
personally to me, it looks kind of like
actually his mother.
Yang Xiaolong a little
When
bit.
Shaq was a baby, Destiny adopted him along with 7 other identical babies. Shaq was the runt among the 8, and Destiny used to carry him around inside her handbag. That is until she discovered the birthmark on Shaq's neck. According to the prophecy, because we don't have enough of those already. Shaq's birthmark was a sign that Shaq was the chosen one, how original, and that he would be Yanlo Wang's demise. She couldn't let that happen, so she put Shaq in a handbag, filled it with bricks, and threw him in the ocean, essentially committing child murder. However, Shaq was saved by a whale named Seymour Prophet, who had been watching over Shaq like a guardian angel his whole life. Anyway, after Yanlo Wang revealed her true form, Shaq fought the god of death herself and eventually defeated her and saved the world. Now, despite all the demons he's slaying and everyone giving him warm welcome back as a hero, deep down, Shaq still believed he was nothing more than a poor Chinese rickshaw driver from a town called Honglo. However, at the end of the final cutscene, Shaq found out that his sensei Yi was still alive, I think. And he told Shaq that there was one demon left they forgot to slay, and it turned out to be the most dangerously evil and egotistical one of them all, aka Kanye West. Shaq and Yi set out to kick some demon arse, and that's the end of the story. But one question remains. Will Shaq whoop that egotistical demon's butt back to hell? Well, we may never know. But if he doesn't, then hopefully Obama will take care of him when the new DLC Barack Fu comes out. Okay, now that we've finally covered one of the most ridiculous and absurdly epic video game stories ever written, it's time to finally see what Shaq is capable of. For starters, Shaq is a martial arts master and has been training his whole life. Not only is he a very skilled fighter, but he has also shown signs of being smarter and more clever than he seems. For example, he successfully learned how to fly a private jet after reading an instruction manual in only a very short amount of time, which is quite impressive as it indicates that he's a very fast learner. Now, not only is he a decent battle strategist, but he's also decently strategic in general, as he was able to track down the locations of each of the demon celebrities in clever ways, one of which involved getting information from an anonymous group. But I'm just gonna move on before the conspiracy nuts show up. Anyway, Shaq has also been shown pulling a Frank West by creatively weaponizing almost anything he gets his hands on, from blades to picket signs, from boulders to barrels. Basically, Shaq's got skill, brains, and brawn. So in a way, it kind of makes sense why Shaq is one of the only people who wasn't affected by Yanlo Wang's brainwashing stupidity. Anyway, not only is Shaq a very skilled fighter and quick thinker, but with a guy like Shaq standing over 7 feet tall, packing over 320 pounds of muscle, and not to mention size 22 shoe size, you can expect Shaq to do some crazy stuff. For example, as you would have guessed, Shaq has rather impressive superhuman strength. He's strong enough to send people flying so high they don't come back down, or at least not on screen. He can break metal shields, once broke down a large metal gate with only 3 hits. He can even smash cars with his bare hands with little effort, as well as larger vehicles like trucks and limousines. And he's even strong enough to grab and pound Yanlo Wang's head into the ground. In fact, if we scale him to Yanlo Wang, his physical strength should be at least building level via size alone, and Yanlo Wang's destructive capability should be roughly town level, as she was able to destroy Shaq's entire hometown of Honglo and turn it into a living hell, literally. Now, Shaq probably doesn't have the same level of destructive capability as Yanlo Wang, but being able to match her physical strength is still very impressive. Now, just because Shaq is strong doesn't mean he's slow, which now leads me to speed. Not only does Shaq's muscular build grant him great strength, but it also gives him very fast combative cat-like reflexes, even capable of reacting to fireworks being shot at him, as well as Yanlo Wang's fire breath. Not only that, but Shaq is also fast enough to dodge rockets, although these rockets don't appear to be propelled, so it's likely they were just being dropped rather than being fired at Shaq. So it's kind of hard to tell if this feat is considered to be roughly supersonic, or possibly less, or roughly hypersonic at most. But you know what, let's give Shaq the benefit of the doubt, or be nice to Shaq and say he's hypersonic, which should be Mach 5. Does that seem fair enough?
In which case they're about equal in terms of speed.
But he can also take quite a hit as well, which leads me to durability. Not only can Shaq constantly take massive beatings and walk him off no problem, but he's also tough enough to tank blades, buzzsaws, fireballs, electroshocks, and rockets. In fact, he appears to take very little damage from rockets. He can also survive attacks from Yanlo Wang, which should be similar to what was mentioned earlier. Now, one of Shaq's most impressive durability feats was when he jumped out of an airplane in mid-flight and landed without a single scratch. In fact, he didn't even seem to be fazed by the landing, nor the terminal velocity that came before it. Assuming this plane was flying at a height of roughly 30,000 feet on average, for a 320-pound man to fall from that height, the landing would be the equivalent of roughly 3.5 tons of TNT. And that's not even counting the terminal velocity. And once again, Shaq survived that without a scratch, so he's definitely a lot harder to take down than he looks. Now that we know Shaq's physicality, let's take a look at his unique ability, shall we? Shaq's signature move is his size 22 attack, where he performs a size 22 combo that ends with him sending out a giant metaphysical shoe, either kicking forward, stomping down, or kicking enemies right to the screen so hard it cracks. Now believe it or not, according to the Shaqopedia, Shaq's size 22 shoes were actually created by the gods of Olympus as a weapon to use against the Titans. Yes, apparently this is the story of Shaq's shoes. Anyway, Shaq also has a few energy-based attacks, such as Shaq Smash.
So this is like God of War rep now?
Enemies he runs into, leaving them open for a finishing blow. However, it depletes half of Shaq's energy meter, which slowly regenerates before he can use it again. And there's also Shaq Wave, where Shaq quote-unquote shakes the earth with his inner essence. In other words, he releases the blue energy collected from Yi's blue balls building up inside him. That just sounds wrong.
Man, that is quite humorous.
Or a large shockwave that does heavy damage to all enemies around him. Not to mention, Shaq can also perform epic moves in slow motion whenever he does a counterattack. However, the most impressive unique ability Shaq has would be his fourth wall awareness. In fact, his level of fourth wall awareness is so high, it actually arguably rivals that of Deadpool. Shaq is aware that he's in a game, and he occasionally criticizes the game logic. In fact, near the end of the game, Shaq talks directly to the game designer and starts to argue with him. You know what? I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about.
Hold it. Who's in charge here?
I am in charge here.
And who are you?
I'm game designer.
All right, Mr. Game Designer. I am tired of this dramatic music. Give me something with a beat.
Okay, yes, I have idea. Here is beat.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, let's go.
Well,
Stop.
looks like I'm putting my money on Shaq on this one.
Get down here.
Yes, the Shaq. I hear.
Stop with the unlimited enemies. That's some free-to-play crap.
I thought it was good idea.
What do you think this is, Flappy Shack?
Okay. I give you something freaky fresh.
Okay, now before people board the hype train and say Shaq can make the game designer do whatever he wants, just like how Popeye can threaten the animator to force the plot of the episode, that's not the case here. The only thing we've seen Shaq negotiate with the game designer about is changing the music and making the enemies less repetitive, which is quite reasonable. I mean, it's not like Shaq would actually force the game designer to make him beat the game instantly, and if that is what Shaq wanted, don't you think he would have done it? I'm pretty sure Shaq knows his limits and boundaries, especially when it comes to what's fair in a video game. But you know what? I'm not gonna argue about that. Now finally, let's see what Shaq's packing up his arsenal. For starters, Shaq can use his signature Icy Hot to heal his wounds and replenish his health. He also has a gold bond, which he uses to communicate with Yi in spirit and summon the guardian whale Seymour Prophet. And not to mention, Yi gets paid every time he says gold bond. However, Shaq's most useful weapons are his two upgraded forms, Shaq Diesel and Shaqdis. Shaq Diesel is a large mechanical suit that Shaq uses to quickly pummel all enemies in his path. However, if he uses it for too long, the suit will overheat and he'll be left exposed while it's cooling down. However, he can relieve some of that overheating pressure with Shaqwave. How convenient. Anyway, his second form, Shaqdis, is where Shaq transforms into a giant walking cactus. Yeah, I know, even Shaq himself thought it was ridiculous. Anyway, this form allows him to shoot razor-sharp spikes at his enemies, as well as large piles of spikes that pierce through multiple enemies at once. Not to mention, being a giant cactus, you definitely don't want to touch Shaq while he's in this form. Now, as unstoppable as Shaq may seem, he's not without his weaknesses. Despite his strategic skill and intellect, he usually prefers to fight first rather than think first. Not only that, but while Shaq is a fair and honorable fighter, he has shown signs of arrogance. His Diesel and Shaqdis forms only last for a limited amount of time, and they don't really increase his defense. Shaq has been shown to be vulnerable to green hellfire in the last level, and despite all the impressive things he's done, Shaq is still technically human, and therefore mortal. In fact, Shaq may have defeated Yen Lo Wang, the god of death, but he didn't do it entirely with physical strength alone. Don't get me wrong, he packed quite a wallop on Yen Lo Wang, and even managed to tear half her face off in the process. Now, after injuring and physically weakening Yen Lo Wang, Shaq defeated her actually by destroying the magical orb that contained her life force, which just so happened to be conveniently placed right next to her, just like the life orbs of all the other demon celebrities in the game. Because Shaq had to do that in order to defeat her, it may indicate that Shaq isn't really as powerful powerful as Yan Wang. Well, once again, he was able to match her strength physically, but in terms of her level of power and destructive capability, that's something else altogether. I think you understand what I'm trying to say, right? However, despite all this, Shaq is still an arse whooping, demon slaying, Shaq attacking fighting machine, and if you're vacuous enough to mess with him, he'll Shaq Fu you up.
This is it, folks.
That was not good. Oh, I'm gonna say Shaq, but I do want Poe to win. I'm gonna have to say Shaq because of, like, his feats and what he can do and whatnot.
Get ready for the next battle. Someone slipped off the Jenny Craig wagon. Looks like you ate all the low-hanging fruit. Fight!
Okay, it looks like a Mortal Kombat sprites. I mean, yeah, because of the designs and whatnot. Oh, Master Hand sprite. Okay, looks like Shaq Poe wins.
Well, looks like Shaq just got dunked on.
Now let's discuss how and why Poe wins this showdown. Now because I've already done a full-on pre-analysis, let's keep this short and simple. Because Poe and Shaq are both obviously martial arts masters, they should most likely be able to fight relatively on par with each other in close combat. Now Poe does have a greater variety of different abilities and weapons in his arsenal, although we could make the argument that Shaq's capability of weaponizing almost anything he gets his hands on would be able to match that, or maybe even steal some of Poe's weapons and use them against him. As debatable as that is, it won't really matter in the long run. Not only that, but we can also make the argument that Shaq could use the spikes from his Shaqtus form to penetrate Poe the same way Mantis did with improper acupuncture, but not only would Shaq have to aim very precisely in the right places, but he wouldn't even know to do that, especially without prep time. Now in terms of physicality, I think this chart is pretty self-explanatory. While Shaq may technically hold a raw strength advantage, but Poe is used to fighting opponents who are stronger and more physically imposing than himself. Now, if we highball Shaq's speed, like I mentioned earlier, then he would be able to keep up with Poe. But realistically, Poe should hold the speed advantage over Shaq. Not only can Poe and Shaq definitely take a lot more damage than they can dish out, but destructive capability is rather debatable. I've already discussed earlier how Shaq might not be entirely as powerful or destructive as Yan Wang, and if that's the case, then it's possible that Poe might have more destructive capability than Shaq. Now, aside from their physical stats, I think we can all agree that Poe's trump card in this battle would definitely be his whooshy fingerhold technique. While Shaq is definitely not easy to put down physically, even Poe would have a hard time doing so, but on the other hand, Shaq doesn't seem to have anything shielding his soul. So, an attack that would magically evaporate his body and banish his soul to the spirit realm, not even Icy Hot could save Shaq from that. Now, don't get me wrong, Shaq would definitely give Poe a great run for his money. In fact, if it wasn't for Poe's speed advantage and the whooshy fingerhold, then there's a good chance that the panda population would have dropped down by one at the enormous hands of Shaq. Also, don't get the wrong idea about the whooshy fingerhold. It's not a broken OP attack that can destroy just anyone. I mean, it's not like Beerus's Hakai or anything like that. In fact, I've already mentioned how the whooshy fingerhold does have its limitations, such as being ineffective against spirit warriors, for example. However, Shaq's not one of those now, is he? So overall, while this battle is definitely a lot closer than it seemed at first glance, I think it's safe to say that Poe definitely has what it takes to skadoosh his way to victory. So So in the end, Shaq is left with a case of pandemonium. The winner of this battle is Po. Oh, and by the way, if you haven't played Shaq Fu Legend Reborn yet, then I highly recommend playing it. It's a great beat 'em up and definitely a fun experience. Not to mention, it's pretty cheap, especially if you buy it on Nintendo eShop. Trust me, it's worth it.
And those puns.
Hashtag Shaq for Smash. Oh, and P.S. I like to give a very special thanks and shout out to the animators of this battle, Wizard Animations and Rampage Animations. They did an amazing job animating tonight's battle, and if you like what you see, then do yourself a favor and go check out their channels and subscribe.
Alright. So, looks like Po wins, and even though Charles won, it's still good in the end. Alright, so, thank y'all for watching, and I will get my reactions to Starfire vs. Android 18 and Noctis vs. Sasuke LA today, but for now, thank y'all for watching. If you like this video and you want to see more, like it. If you add on new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. Hit the bell to be notified when I upload another video. Check me out on social media, and yeah, so thanks to everyone, all the veterans and newcomers for watching, and reach out, y'all. Peace.